Hello, and welcome to the Boffin Buzz, the podcast for anyone fascinated by farming's future. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Boffin Buzz. And just to remind everyone that we now receive basis CPT points for listening to this episode. So I will give you the details on how to claim your basis CPT points at the end of this episode. But very excited this week. Our guest this week is Adam Lewis. So good morning, Adam.
Good morning, Tom. Good morning, everyone.
So Adam farms in partnership with his wife, Jane, in Herefordshire. And you recently joined us as a Slug Sleuth in year 2 of the project, Adams. Now, we're going to talk about the Slug Sleuth in a later episode of the Boffin Buzz. So about the Slug project and how you're getting on with that. But first of all, I'd like to find out a little bit more about your farm, Adam. So would you just like to introduce yourselves?
Yes. Well, thank you very much. And thanks for giving me the opportunity to have a chat with you guys. I farm in partnership, as you said, here in North Herefordshire, 400-acre holding. I come from a livestock farming background and accidentally ended up being an arable farmer.
How did that happen, then?
Well, my family is originally from South Wales, moved to Herefordshire, and then as I've got 2 older brothers, they sort of naturally then came back to the farming business, and so I was brought up with livestock, milking cows around the Bromyard area. I suppose it became fairly apparent to me as time went on that I probably wasn't going to be joining the family business, but I'd always wanted to farm. So I ended up then working for a farm management consultancy business up in Leicestershire, sort of managing or helping manage dairy farms, both physical management and sort of financial management up in Leicestershire. And then we were very lucky then to have the opportunity to take on a family business tenancy on the farm we are here now. Back in the 90s, and hence really that's where we are. It was our ambition really to get into livestock, but we had no livestock buildings. There was no buildings on the farm at all to start with years ago, and it wasn't fenced, it wasn't watered. It'd be already been established as an arable unit. So we took the tenancy on and carried on working up in Leicestershire, going back and forth, trying to manage the farm as an arable unit. And then there was BSE and foot and mouth, and it was just hasn't happened really. The sort of entry into livestock. So that's where we are.
So you stuck with arable. So tell us a bit about the farm itself. I mean, what sort of soil types are you on? What sort of topography and so on?
We've got 400 acres here, and then I rent 250 acres as a neighbouring farm as well. So the unit is 650 acres in fact, and I do some bit of contract work and that sort of thing. And we're in some quite steep, undulating North Herefordshire topography. So it's quite heavily wooded in the dingles, and then the soil type ranges very, very quickly, as most of sort of Herefordshire seems to really, from a Bromyard series clay silt to a gravelly loam, and that's a consequence of sort of the glacial period. As I know, most of the sort of country seems to be affected by the glacial period. But so you can travel very quickly from a sort of a gravelly loam into a Bromyard series within probably 75, 80 yards really. So it throws up it.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that sort of I mean, that sounds like you've got some quite strong land there, but perhaps also reasonably drought prone. How does it perform?
It's similar again. We're at a level of 220 meters at our highest point, and we're almost at the top of an aquifer, and we get a lot of water coming out of the rock shelves, which has its own issues really.
Springs, you mean, in the middle of
spring? It doesn't seem to matter where you put a drain. The spring then decides it wants to move, and you're caught out. So I've given up on trying to drain it. the different soil types has been an issue at times. When you're trying to plant and prepare a seed bed, some bits are over cultivated, some bits are under. You have to adjust seed rates accordingly, and then obviously pulling machinery on steep ground is an issue in itself. So we seem to have overcome that now and learned as time goes on that patience really is your friend, which I'm notorious for having an issue with patience. So yeah, I usually try and batter it down as best I can, or used to, but now, taking a different approach.
Yeah. So the in terms of sort of where you're doing what you're doing with your cultivations and things like that. I mean, I always ask people, how do you describe yourself? Would you say you're a conventional farmer or a regenerative farmer?
I'm going to step in the middle of the two then, Tom, and say I'm flexi regenerative.
Flexi regenerative. There's a new category.
Exactly. I run very minimal amount of machinery, so I've got a drill, and I've got a set of rolls, and I've got a press, and that's pretty much it, really. And so I've been strip tilling since 2016, I think.
All right.
And then sort of
And
since
what sort of drill is that?
that's a Missouri.
Right. And how are you getting on
Um,
with that? Is it working
yeah,
well?
great. Yeah, it's
Right.
transformed. It's transformed the management of the farm, and it's transformed my time management
Yep.
as well. And the soils seem to be equalising up a little bit. The gravelly areas seem to be, becoming a little bit more sort of easier to manage, and the clayer sort of areas seem to be, the tilth seems to be easier to attain on the top, really, for a
Right.
seedbed. And so, yeah, it's been, I would say, a game changer, really. I certainly wouldn't want to go back. And in
I mean,
fact,
I'd
I did
suggest.
take a step. I did take a step. Sorry to interrupt.
Sorry.
I did take a step back, and I did at one point buy a disc drill,
All
and
right.
yeah, it just didn't really suit where I was, and maybe even my mindset, to be perfectly honest with you. So, then I sort of resorted back to what we call the Missouri system, really. Then,
Yeah, I see. Yeah. So, I mean, I'd say if you've been doing that since 2016, Adam, you're quite well down your regen journey, aren't you?
yeah, well, I stopped ploughing in, I think it was something like wholesale ploughing in probably 2002, 2004. And
Right.
then I was just rotationally ploughing for winter oats after wheat up until about 2007. And from there on, really, I've been reducing my tillage depth really up until I went to the Missouri system. And then 2 years before that, I messed around a little bit with, a subsoiler on the front of the power harrow combination. And that worked
Right.
to some extent. And I think then that sort of demonstrated to me, how the strip till system probably could be adapted and work on the farm. So that's really what led me in. It's been a long and slow progression, I suppose, to where I am now.
Right. Yeah. No, I've heard a lot of farmers say the same thing, and I think here at home, I think we're right at the start of our regen journey. I'm constantly having battles with our contractors about whether we
Mm.
should plough or not, and I'm never entirely sure. We haven't ploughed for quite some time now. Must be a good 5 or 6 years, I suppose, since we last ploughed. And every year, especially in the last couple of years, the temptation to just plow and do the whole power harrow combination thing, but I do believe that we're beginning to get something back into our soils, but it's a long old process.
It is, it is, and I
Yeah,
think you've got to be happy in your mindset about the where you are, and if you're not
yeah,
happy doing it, really, I think the last thing you want to be doing is going down a route really that you're not 100% convinced about. And at the end of the day, you've got to make the finances stack up. And
yeah.
if you feel as though you can do a better job with the plough, then I think that's how you should be progressing until you're at that point where you want to take the next step.
Yeah. Now, I wanted to ask you about your experiences as a AHDB monitor farmer.
Mm.
Just tell me a little bit, about why you wanted to be involved as a monitor farmer.
We've got quite a strong history, I suppose, of monitor farmers within Herefordshire, and obviously, I know the guys that have done it in the past and spoken to them about it, and what have you. Yeah, I thought it'd be quite a good challenge for me to take on from a personal development perspective as well as an agricultural perspective. I'm honest with you.
Right.
I'm not a particularly good public speaker until I'm actually forced to do it. So I thought, right, okay, this is possibly the chance for me or the opportunity for me to actually sort of be forced, maybe to feel uncomfortable, people speaking in public. So that was one of the reasons, actually, to do it. I suppose really to improve really my public speaking role. Not that I
Right.
tend to do an awful lot of it, but unless you're actually forced to do it, then you generally don't do it.
Yeah.
And also, I wanted to try and get involved really in some of the sort of research development, what you do on farm and how you can sort of not necessarily influence others, but explain what you're doing and why you're doing it and what results you're getting.
Yep.
The results, I've done, from sort of little bits of on farm experiments and all the rest of it in the past. Some have been good, some have failed, some have been adopted, as farm practice. So I think nothing beats really your own farm sort of experiments a bit. So, and I've been doing that a little bit for some time. And so I think it was almost an excuse for me to open the doors and show people really what I've been doing. At the time I was quite an advocate really of, the sort of regenerative system. So, and it wasn't really very widely adopted in the county, or the sort of West Midlands area, as it were. So thought, right, yeah, let's open the doors, let people in, and they actually might drive the business through some of their suggestions as well as what's coming from me.
Yeah, well, I'd have to say, I mean, obviously, that absolutely strikes at the heart of what we do at Boffin in terms of supporting farmers who do on-farm trials, and that's the thing, as I've been very lucky over the years that I've visited loads of farmers, really good progressive farmers, and that was one of the things I noticed that more and more farmers are doing on-farm trials off their own bat. But if you're just doing them in isolation, you never know quite whether you're on the right track. I suppose it's great to have other farmers to sort of bounce your ideas off. And I mean, the way the Monitor Farm network is set up, I quite like the way it's done in terms of bringing people together. It's quite a relaxed environment as well, isn't it?
It is, yeah,
So
very much so.
what years? Because I don't, you're no longer a Monitor farmer, is
No,
that right? Yeah.
I
So what
finished
years were you
I,
involved then?
from 2020 to 24. We had an
Right.
extra year because of COVID, basically.
I
So,
see.
and then, I must say as well that there was a group of four of us as part of the sort of Herefordshire Monitor Farm system. So,
Yeah.
that helped a little bit really as well in the fact that we had our own little steering group, what we were going to do, what we were going to try and achieve. And we were all sort of relatively like-minded and had sort of similar objectives behind our businesses. Having the group of four of us, really did help a little bit. And it was,
Yeah.
yeah, it was a great experience, really.
Great. And it's that sharing of experiences as well. I mean, I hear a lot from other farmers, and it's the same for myself, that you find that the more you share, the more you get back, and actually you get more back from others than you feel that you're actually sharing yourself, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I think we pretty much all know what we do well, and it's
yeah.
sometimes it's the things we don't do so well that are quite obvious to others, but we don't see them ourselves.
Yeah.
And so I think having others on farm, whether it's actually the fact that we stand in a shed and just talk about sort of statically, what we do, or whether they come and have a look around the farm and make suggestions as you're wandering around, as it were. It's been a good experience really from that perspective.
Yeah.
I've certainly made changes on the farm since being a monitor farmer that I may well have not have implemented. And likewise, I've dropped things as well that I thought was a good idea. Necessarily get them to work, or if I had got them to work, they were difficult to implement. So,
Well, that was one thing
so
I
yeah,
wanted to ask Adam. In terms of the sort of challenges that you've faced, and that you feel that you're addressing. I mean, are there any sort of challenges in particular that you that you feel you've addressed over the years as a monitor farmer or otherwise?
Going back to when we first moved here, it was because it was very steep and undulating
Yeah,
soil. There was an awful lot of soil erosion, and it was fairly evident. You could spot it from a mile away, the amount of soil that was being lost. And so, I have quite a passion really from my father, I suppose. So he instilled a passion for soil in me, and it was my time really to address the soil erosion and the soil health issues on the farm. And so that was something really that I did want to take up a long time ago. And we seem to have got on top of that problem, and the soil has improved massively. It was low organic matter soil, and through sort of chopped straw, some organic matter through manures being put back, although I've stopped that through the use of imported muck because of blackgrass issues.
right.
So it's all the organic matter now basically is coming from cover crops and straw incorporation.
Right. And is that so? The sort of key things that you feel is making a difference there is building the soil organic matter in the soils. Is that right?
Yeah, most definitely. Not disturbing the soil. The other thing as well is the
Right.
soil has become an awful lot more uniform throughout for example, across a field, the gravelly areas are becoming more uniform with the silty clay areas, and I think that's really down to cover crops, straw incorporation, straw management, and not actually turning the soil and mixing the soil up. That's residue
Yeah.
staying on top and actually being pulled in by soil microbes and earthworms, and that's staying really in the top profile. And has certainly helped really in the structure of the soil.
Has the Missouri drill been quite a big part of that then?
I would say it's been pretty much key to it. Yes,
Right.
yeah,
Well,
yeah. I don't the combine obviously cuts the crop, straw gets chopped, spread out, and that just gets left on top. I don't
yeah.
do anything other than spray it off after the combine goes in to when the drill goes in. So yes, very easy, very simple. And so
Have you got any numbers to hang on that? By the way, Adam, in terms of you mentioned your soil organic matter. Have you been measuring that over the years?
yes, when we first moved here, soil organics were anywhere between 1.8 and around 2.3.
Crikey.
And they're now sort of getting towards the 3.5, 3.8.
Wow.
Of which, that majority of that is in the soil surface. And it's quite pleasing really when you're walking across a field to see the amount of earthworm casts. Those don't get disturbed; those get left on the soil, almost to the point really where now the soil probably ought to have something done with it a little bit, because it's almost getting a little bit too silty on top. I have had the odd incident where I've had a bit of capping, and I think that's probably from the historic build-up of worm casts on top, and maybe we ought to maybe think about moving a little bit of soil just to incorporate some of those worm casts, maybe only just to 2 centimeters, 3 centimeters, but
Well,
yeah.
mind you, it's a nice place to be to have too many worm casts. That obviously means plenty of worms, which can't be a bad thing, Adam.
Yeah, no, they've certainly,
Yeah.
it's very evident really where we've come from on
Yeah.
that note. The other thing that we made a change in, and I don't know when it was, probably about 7 or 8 years ago. I stopped using insecticide, and I've not used an insecticide at all on the farm for 7, 8, maybe even 10 years. Broad spectrum insecticides, and you certainly notice the improvement in beetles, which I suppose is mostly one of the obvious indicators. We get a lot of Devil's Coachman beetles now, and I'd never seen one really up until probably about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and they're quite abundant now, which is great. And whether it's just a little bit of hopeful thinking on my part or not, but I think it may actually be having a little bit of an influence on slug numbers.
Well, we'll come to that in the next part of our podcast, Adam. We'll talk in
Get
more
ahead of
detail
myself.
about that. But I just wanted to ask finally, about any plans. I mean, it sounds as though you've come quite a long way with your farm. And as I say, I'd say that you're not flexi regenerative. You're well on your regenerative journey. I would have said. What are your plans for? What else do you want to achieve on the farm?
Yeah, we've got to a really nice almost and secure sort of position on the farm, really, regarding our soils and what we're doing. One thing I have actually noticed this time, someone suggested, very kindly said, do you want to use a subsoiler this year? And just on a demo basis, and I knew the bloke quite well, so he brought it up. And I think it has demonstrated, where I have subsoiled, the need for me to actually rotationally subsoil, which I think will actually then improve some of the resilience within the soil. I think we were getting a lot of pooling, not a lot of pooling, but an element of pooling in the soil surface. I think that has helped in two particularly poor fields that I did subsoil, so I think we will be rotationally subsoiling.
Right.
And something that I do, and it's an ongoing thing, and it takes a long time to achieve it, but one focus really over, I suppose, several years now, or quite a few years, has been trying to make the business more resilient.
Right.
And I think that really, I suppose, the cornerstone of that, in effect, is trying to make it more weather resilient. I think we have made big strides in that, in the fact that, RTK, the fields are mapped RTK, and the tram lines don't move. So, and then there's no bale traffic. In fact, to be honest with you, I sold straw this year, and that's the first time in many years I've sold straw. So I don't really get a lot of trafficking on the fields. And so we are, enhancing or affecting our, farm resilience. And so I think the, weather certainly has been a big issue, and it's fairly obvious this last couple of years, the issues that weather has presented. But, even really on the...
Sorry, with your slopes, Adam, you are very exposed to that, and it sounds like you've put a lot in place already to hold the soil in place. But I mean, what's the? You mentioned. Are you actually doing controlled traffic farming at the moment?
No, I'm not controlled traffic farming. No, but
Right.
the sprayer.
Would that be an aspiration? Do you think?
I think, to be honest with you, Tom, probably not really at where we are on some of our banks. Some of the banks really are combined one way, but cultivate and plant across the bank, which, gets a bit hairy at times, but, they are quite steep. And I think trying to implement a controlled traffic system probably isn't going to be feasible. For example, when I drill, I always drill at an angle to the tram lines, and that angle then is changed every year. So that obviously is going to have its challenges in itself. I don't think controlled traffic is probably going to be maybe if I was bigger, that might be an opportunity. But on the size of the business that we are now, I don't run, as I was saying, I've got basically 3 bits of kit: press, bowl, and drill.
Right.
And I don't think it can come much simpler than that, really.
Fantastic. Well, there's benefits in simplicity, aren't there? But I think that's just about time, all we've got time for at the moment, Adam. But don't leave us, Adam, because we're going to be coming back in another episode of the Boffin Buzz, where we're going to be talking more about the Slug project and the Slimers project that you're involved in. And slugs in general, which are a bit of a challenge at the moment. But just to remind everybody that basis members can claim 1 CPD point for listening to both parts of this podcast with Adam. Now, the first half of the code will hopefully, if the technology works, be coming up on your screen. But do please join us for the second part of this podcast. But for now, thank you very much, Adam. Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you very much for listening, everybody. And goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.